if USC wants to be successful on offense, the line is going to have to show they are a strength this year.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holken, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you are downloading your podcast, the show is always free, and the show will always appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking us up with all their customers with a boost or a bonus. And they're doing it daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com and you can get started today. All right, Trojan fans, welcome to a new week. In a couple of days, the big conference media days will start up. Going to have that on full lockdown or locked on, whatever you want to call it. I'll be there. I ended last week talking about how USC, they need to, if they want to be successful in offense, they're going to have to rush at least for 2,000 yards in the 2024 season. For that to happen, the guys up front are going to have to be a focal point in 2024. With USC and LSU, they're kicking off their season. We are now what? September 1st, so what does that make it? 42 days, 41 days, depending on when you're watching this episode. And again, we're just a few days away from the big conference and media days. And once that happens, once those are over, USC will open up fall camp in 2 weeks, roughly. So what I wanted to do, I want to get the fans started, getting them ready for the season. And I started to do my USC power rankings. And I started with the offensive positions. We're going to go through that first, and then I'm going to move over to the defensive side of the ball. And I wanted to start with the offensive line. They are, technically, I should have had them tied with the tight ends. But there's 5 position groups on the opposite side of the ball. Offensive line, tight ends, wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks. I ranked the offensive line 5th, lowest. And I'm going to give you my rationale for the reason why. The difference, what separates them from the tight ends is USC's offense can be successful without a tight end group. We've seen it happen for 2 years with Lincoln Riley. We always wonder how much more successful it can be with the tight ends being integrated. But we'll save that for when we talk about them. Right now, the offensive line is I would call it the lowest ranked of the 5 positions on the opposite side of the ball. Now, I think in 2024, because the starting positions have been identified already, a lot of the same guys are returning from last year. They're just going to be playing in more of their natural positions. A more natural role. And there's no transfers coming in playing out of position. And I think that was a big part of last year's issue. So USC's offensive line, it's talented. It's new. And we're just trying to see if the production can be better than last year. Can they take that next step under Josh Henson? Last year, when USC opened the season against San Jose State, this was your offensive line. You had Jonah Monheim at left tackle. You had Alani Noah at left guard. Justin Diedick, center. Gino Quinones, right guard. Michael Tarquin at right tackle. As the game went along, you saw a whole bunch of different groupings go in there. You saw Monheim, Noah, Diedick, Quinones, Murphy. Monheim, Quinones, Diedick, Jared Kingston, Murphy. You saw Mason Murphy at left tackle. Alani Noah, Gino Quinones at center, Emmanuel Pregnone at right guard, Michael Tarquin back at right tackle. I mean, it was just it almost felt like it was a tryout more than anything else. And I think that's what led to the offensive line's challenges in 2023. Nobody really had a defined role, and the roles that they were playing in weren't their natural positions. I mean, you brought Jared Kingston in from Washington State, and you didn't play him at the position that he excelled at as a Cougar. Same thing with Michael Tarquin. In 2024, the projected core players and starters from left to right, it's already been defined. You're going to have Elijah Page as your starting left tackle. Emmanuel Preyon is settled in at left guard. Jonah Monheim is your starting center. Alani Noah, right guard. Mason Murphy, right tackle. So Jonah is now starting at his fifth position along the offensive line since he arrived at USC. This is his natural position. This is where the NFL projects him to play when he enters the draft in 2025. So he'll be at center. The room itself, I think the numbers are fine. Okay. But there's more to just having enough numbers. USC's got 11, 12 guys. The question for me, why I have the offensive line ranked as low as I have them, it has to do with the backups. They're young. And then the other question is, the group they're big and they're physical enough to play in the conference. Are they big enough? And are they going to be physical enough to play in the conference? Now, when I compare USC's rooms on offense, again, there's very little doubt that the offensive line remains at least for me, at the bottom of the offensive power list. Again, the concern, it's not centered around the players, not the ones that are coming back. It's whether they can be productive in their new roles. Okay. Last year, as a group, they gave up 33 sacks in pass protection, and the run game was also tested. But that's, in my opinion, it was tested more because of the play calling. USC showed that they could run the ball. They just didn't do it. They didn't do it enough. So why number 5 for the offensive line? Again, for me, it's harder to claim 5 high-level players compared to like USC's wide receiver group. I'm going to tell you right now, that's going to be number 1. They have a history, year after year, of producing. That hasn't been the case with the offensive line. One of the concerns for me, left tackle. Elijah showed me during the Holiday Bowl that he can handle the job against a top 30 defense. But he had basically 30 days to prepare for one team. The USC staff now, they've been grooming Elijah since he stepped on campus as an early enrollee almost 2 years ago. So now he's heading into his second season. It's his job full time. And he's going to start doing that against LSU. Same question on the right side, tackle. Mason Murphy, he's been around going into his 4th year as a redshirt junior, but he's been inconsistent. Excuse me. Now, some of that isn't, I don't hold him fully responsible for not locking down a position by his 4th year. He's had multiple chances, but that's the problem. It's been at different positions. He's been tried out at both guard spots, both tackle spots. Since he's been at USC, he's appeared in 27 games, 10 starts, 5 at right guard, 3 at left tackle, 2 at right tackle. The only position he hasn't played is center. If Murphy isn't ready, if he can't show that he's going to be consistent, the next man up is a redshirt freshman, Tobias Raymond. Okay, he redshirted last year. He played in 2 games, Nevada and Stanford. The strength of USC's offensive line is the interior depth. It's very talented, by far the strength of the line. And some of the reasons for the optimism there, obviously it starts with Jonah Monheim. His size, his intellect playing center is exactly what you want. You got Preyon at left guard, huge. You have Alani Noah at right guard, also huge. So you have Noah. He finally was I think he's going to be able to settle in his second year. Remember, last year's a true freshman. He started in his first game of his college career, and then he struggled a little bit. And it's very understandable why. I'll remind everybody, he lost both of his parents within a very short period. So what he was dealing with off the field obviously kind of carried over onto the field. And again, when you're away from home for the first time and you're dealing with that, it's understandable. So this is what USC will be starting on the interior. Size-wise, you're going to have left guard Emmanuel Preyon, redshirt senior, 6'5", 320 pounds. Jonah Monheim, 6'5", 305 pounds. And then you got 6'4", 330 pounds, sophomore Olani Noah. Backing up those guys, again, big, strong, but it's young. They're all freshmen, except for you have Gino Quinones and you have preferred walk-on, Killian O'Connor, who's, Gino is versatile enough that he can play pretty much, I would say, at least 3, possibly 4 positions. Killian is worked his way as the backup center behind Jonah. As far as the running game is concerned, I mentioned it just a minute ago, USC showed they could run the ball when they wanted to. Now, with Miller Moss probably going to be your starting quarterback, I'm really hoping Coach Riley leans into it more. Not because Moss isn't capable of throwing it 35 plus per game, 35 times or more. However, when you have a strong running game, I think the pass protection is going to be that much easier. Here are my reasons for optimism. Okay. We know that USC was looking for help in the transfer portal in the spring, specifically at the tackle positions. They didn't push the issue. Just for the sake of bringing guys, they didn't bring anybody in. So that's a positive sign. It indicates to me that they're comfortable with the room's talent level, despite the lack of experience. And don't forget, Coach Riley did talk about this after spring. He talked about the size, and this is why I think the running game is going to play a bigger role in 2024. He said this: I do think we're going to have the ability right now to move more people off the ball than we've had in the first 2 years. We've got a little bit more mass and a little bit more girth with us. We're going to look more like an offensive line at USC, what it should look like. I think that's very exciting. So for me, the margin of error is what separates the offensive line room from moving up one spot and moving the tight end group down to number 5. The ceiling with this group is high. The challenge is it's a really low ceiling if somebody gets hurt, especially if one or more players get hurt. There's not a lot of room for error because, again, the depth, it's young. And a lot of that depth has no experience. So I just told you, the next group up I'm going to talk about, it's going to be the tight ends. I'll say that for another episode. I love sports, right? I love them so much. I can't wait for USC football to start. It's almost here. But right now, we're in the middle of Major League Baseball season. The playoffs are done in hockey and basketball. And the sports, they're just not sporting for me the way I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sporting whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus, and they're doing it daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. You're like me. You probably have Fox Sports on one TV. You probably have ESPN on another TV. And you're hitting the mute button on one of them because someone's always screaming at you. You won't have to do that if you make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, and it's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the yelling. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, and it's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Assuming the 2 biggest spenders during the offseason are picked number 1 and number 2 in the big conference, who's going to be picked 3rd behind Ohio State and Oregon. The big conference doesn't do a formal preseason poll. Michigan with Sharon Moore is taking over the job permanently. And the Wolverines have some playmakers returning on defense. You got Will Johnson out there on an island at cornerback, and they got a couple of really good defensive tackles. So after Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon, who most are predicting are going to finish 1 and 2 in the conference, Michigan is the third team. What I'm using right here is Athlon. They came out earlier and they gave out we'll call it their preseason ranking. Let me give it to you real quick. So they listed off their top 5 this way. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, again, because they're returning those players on defense. The question mark for Michigan is on offense. You are returning Donovan Edwards at the running back position, very fast, very quick, very elusive. And you're also bringing back the tight end, Colston Loveland. So what else are they bringing back? They lost a lot, including coaching staff and a lot of players to the draft. They have Penn State ranked number 4 after Michigan. Penn State has made a lot of offseason changes as well. The biggest one, they change at offensive coordinator. And their job is, can they get their quarterback to match what they can produce running the ball with their running game? Again, the Nittany Lions did lose some notable contributors to the draft, but they got enough guys returning at leadership positions that should at least keep them in the hunt for the conference championship. Now, USC could get some attention. They could jump as high as number 3 if those changes on the defensive side of the ball take hold. Nevertheless, the order behind Ohio State and Oregon is going to be something to watch, right? Especially when it comes to gauging the expectations of the league. So earlier in the month, Athlon released their ranking. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, and USC were their top 5. They finished it off 6 through 18 this way: Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Washington at 10, Maryland 11, Minnesota 12, Michigan State 13, UCLA at 14, Illinois at 15, Northwestern at 16, Illinois at 15, Northwestern at 16, Indiana at 17, Purdue rounds it out at 18. I apologize. It's getting a little late in the evening for me here. That is how Athlon threw their ballot in there. This is how my ballot looks, if I have a ballot, if I had one. I've got Ohio State number 1. I'm going to have them finishing at 11-1 in the season. I've got USC at 10-2. I've got Float U, Oregon at 10-2. And number 3, I've got Penn State 10-2. I have them finishing number 4. Michigan at 9-3. Okay, they have a new head coach, Sharon Moore. Nebraska at number 6. I have them finishing either 8-4, 9-3. I have them at 9-3 if they go into that Ohio State game at 7-0. Okay, this is their first 7 games. Texas, El Paso, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, at Purdue, Rutgers, at Indiana. Pretty favorable. We'll see what kind of confidence they have when they roll into Columbus. And then you've got Iowa 8-4. That's me. Michigan State, Jonathan Smith, 7 wins, 8 wins. I don't know. For me, he's a solid head coach. He'll have Michigan State right in the middle of the pack. I got Washington at number 9. Jed Fish, new coach at Washington. It's going to take some time for him to turn that roster over and let his culture, his footprint kind of settle in. After Washington, I have Wisconsin at number 10. Last year when Luke Fickell took over, he got them to a 7-6 season. He's got to improve on that. I don't know if Wisconsin's ready to take that next leap into the top 5 yet. After that, I've got Rutgers 7-5. Greg Schiano going to play defense at Rutgers. We know that. he needs to find an offense. I got Maryland at number 12. They got to start over without Talia Tagovailoa playing quarterback, Tua's little bro. After that, you can throw the rest of the teams in a hat and kind of. This is how I have them ranked. I got Indiana, UCLA, Purdue, Illinois, Minnesota, Northwestern. Again, throw those final teams in a hat, shake it up. I really don't think it makes a difference. And I really don't think you care how they finish either, nor my opinion on it. If you paid attention to one of last week's episodes of Locked on USC, I talked about the college football professor, Adam McClintock, and his matrix formula that he uses and how he has USC, well, not him, but the algorithm spit it out USC going 12-0. I'm not there. I do have USC going 10-2 in 2024. And if they're going 10-2, I've got them right in the thick of things, number 2 in the conference. You agree? Do you disagree with the rankings? Hit me up. Let me know. You know where to find me. Hit me up on YouTube. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. All right. Talked about it. A couple of days away. Big conference media days. How many questions do you think Lincoln Riley is going to be bombarded with regards to his defense? USC is on the second day of the conference media day schedule. That schedule has USC going last. It starts the day with Iowa. Then you've got Michigan State, Nebraska, Penn State, UCLA, and then USC. Now, of those teams, USC plays 3 of them. And all 3 of them are going to be in Los Angeles, Nebraska, Penn State, and UCLA. That's at the Rose Bowl. Technically, not a home game. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the media day starts and ends. Remember, it was Iowa's Kirk Ferentz who started some bowl game kerfuffle when he called out Lincoln Riley's Trojans. You might remember, like he said, I think there's a guy that entered the conference recently that came with widely acclaimed offensive stats and all that. That's usually how those guys become well known because of whatever they're doing, throwing it, running it, wishbone. But then you look a little deeper. What's this guy's wins per game? There's a school on the West Coast right now that's going to recommit to defense. They gave up 42 points to Tulane last year in a bowl game at a place where Ronnie Lott played. So now they're going to think about defense, you know? He said all of that, okay? He was throwing haymakers at Lincoln Riley, throwing haymakers at USC because USC, he doesn't recognize USC, he doesn't recognize USC's defense. And I commend him for at least saying, you know what, that's not the USC I know. But he said all that, and then lo and behold, his great Iowa Hawkeyes defense, what happens? They get embarrassed in their bowl game. USC, they looked a little bit better on defense in their bowl game, but they looked just as efficient as we thought they were, we thought they would on offense. It was Miller Moss's coming out party. So Iowa is going to start the day, and then USC's at the end of the day. So last week you had the SEC media day, right? Paul Feinbaum, he went full teenager. He was raging hormones, screaming at the world, making no sense. It's curious to me. Iowa starting the day. The last thing people have been hearing about with USC has been coming from the SEC media days, and it's Paul Feinbaum saying USC needs to fire Lincoln Riley. I'm looking forward to seeing what the media's energy is going to be like at the end of the day. When USC finally takes the dais, how aggressive are they going to be? I know in the Pac-12, well, in the former Pac-12, each coach got approximately 35 minutes or so, give or take, roughly. I'm not sure how long the big conference allocates per team. This is new to me. But I do wonder how much of Riley's time is going to be spent answering questions regarding those two. What Kirk Ferentz said, what Paul Feinbaum said. And then how much is Miller Moss and Jonah Monheim and Kamari Ramsey, former Bruin. Are they going to be talking about, how people perceive USC on the outside looking in? How much of the questions is, tell us about USC, but not from the perspective of what that person's saying or what that person's saying. I find what's really interesting for me is Kamari Ramsey being a choice. Remember, I don't know how many of you are aware of this. He almost became a USC Trojan out of high school. Something happened towards the tail end of that recruiting process, and the communication process between USC and Ramsey kind of shut down. He was literally all set to pick USC. Something happened, and he ended up at UCLA. Well, things happen for a reason. He's gonna be finishing up at USC. I'm curious to see, how he talks about the differences between the two programs, because that's going to come up. What other questions are going to come up? Again, how is USC going to adapt to the big conference? Are they going to be physical enough? Can they run the ball? Can they stop the run game? Those are the anticipated questions. I'm curious to see who is going to have a little bit of animosity. Who's going to try and get Lincoln Riley off his game? Lincoln Riley, he knows how to handle the microphone. I'm not worried about that. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to it. Again, looking forward to having lunch with him, getting some stuff off the record. I'll be there. I'll be getting as much information as possible so I can bring it back here to Locked On USC. And when you're not making Locked On USC your first listen every day, which you should be, once you're done, you're heading on over to WeAreRC.com, because we've got a lot of written content over there. So we're 2.5 weeks away from fall camp starting. USC's media day is just a couple days away. Are you ready for some football? Well, off season is not over yet, but for me, once I touch down in Indianapolis, game on. All right. I will be back with another episode of Locked On USC tomorrow. I'm going to see if I can gather some recruiting information. I didn't talk about a recruit that USC did not get over the weekend. I'll talk about that maybe tomorrow on the next episode. I know I'm getting some requests for some basketball. We'll see how we can squeeze that in. But things are always happening. So until that next episode, everyone, you know what to do.